What's up, guys? In the works, and oh yes, the little G53, one of the many weapons that actually got changed in the recent Aftermath DLC patch. And you're probably asking yourself, Jake, what happened to this weapon? What did they actually do to it? Well, they reduced the upward recoil on the G53 by about 7%. Now, that's give or take a little bit, but essentially, they reduced the upward recoil on this thing. So vertical recoil, whatever you prefer to call it, the muzzle climb, it doesn't go up to the moon quite as much as it used to. And you're probably like, well, that's not that big of a change. Well, on a weapon like this, which I don't see it used all too often, I mean, it only shoots 750 rounds per minute, which really doesn't make it stand out from the crowd. It's pretty similar to the G36, pretty similar to the G53. It doesn't really do a whole lot of things well. But I still found myself using this weapon quite a bit before the patch, and I was actually kind of intrigued by this, more so than some of the other weapons that were getting changed. I was like, okay, let's see if this helps out this weapon some. Kind of make it a little bit more controllable, because that was one of the things that I didn't like about it, is I always felt like it wasn't as controllable as some of the other engineer weapons. So they've changed it up, they've reduced the muzzle climb on this thing, and does it make it better? That's probably what you're asking yourself. I took the time to make this video. I must have a pretty strong opinion on the G53, but yes, it is rather nice. It is much better than it used to be. It's much more controllable. I find myself able to stay on target much better than I was in the past, because that was one of the things I always had a problem with, was the muzzle climb on it. It just seemed like it was just too much for a weapon that only shot 750 rounds per minute. And this is actually a pretty funny turn of events right here. We kill them out of this Phoenix right here, repair it. They steal it back, so we kill them out of it again, and we repair it, and then I'll let you see what happens after that. So at the end of the day, we ended up going back to the way it was. They ended up with the Phoenix, and we ended up dead. So it was kind of a bummer, but I thought it was kind of funny. That was one of my many travels with the G53, but I've been using this a lot on these maps. I find it actually works really well, just because it is a little bit more controllable, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of other weapons I think that I would rather use than the G53. It doesn't seem to do it for me. I've tried so hard to just kind of get into this groove of using this weapon, and I've used it a lot, don't get me wrong. Before patch, I made sure that I had a pretty good idea of how it felt before the patch. It felt a little bit more wild. To me, it just had too much upward recoil, especially if you're using heavy barrel. Now, I rotate between heavy barrel and laser sight. I think I like heavy barrel the best on it, though, because laser sight doesn't really help you a whole lot on the Aftermath maps. I think if you're going to be playing with the G53 on the Aftermath maps, you might want to stick to the heavy barrel. I think it's going to have more upside than perhaps a laser sight. Now, there are a lot of areas where you get in close. There's a lot of MCOMs that are placed in, like, close quarters hallways where hip fire can be really advantageous, but for the most part I find myself in engagements where the heavy barrel really comes into play. And I think that 7% reduction in the vertical climb on this really starts to kind of show off when you're using the heavy barrel, because it is a little bit more controllable than it was in the past. Because when I was using this thing pre-patch with the heavy barrel, I felt like I was using a mini G3, because you would think a weapon with a low RPM wouldn't have a lot of muzzle climb, wouldn't have a lot of recoil in general, but for some reason the G53 kind of behaved a little bit differently. But now it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more advantageous to use this weapon. Like I said, I don't know if I could recommend it over, let's say, an SG553 or a G36C, because those are pretty comparable to that weapon. But I find the reload is what really seems to gripe me with it, because it does have a pretty slow reload. It's 3.2 if it's empty, and that's rather slow. I mean, if you compare it to the G36, it has a 2.8 reload, so you gain almost 0.4 seconds on the reload if you use the G36. The SG553, its closest competitor in my eyes, has a 2.6 reload, so you gain almost 0.6 seconds if you're using that weapon. So I think if you want to go for a low RPM controllable engineer weapon, I think the SG553 and the G36 are much more attractive options, rather than going out and using the G53. And that's not to say you can't get work done with this, because it is doable. I mean, you can do fairly decently with this weapon. I think the change was much needed. I think it makes it much more competitive in the controllable RPM engineer weapons now, because I mean, you've got 3 or 4 attractive choices, but I still think that there's others out there that will do the job a little bit better. So sorry, G53 fans, I'm not going to say that it's the best weapon in the game. So I know a lot of you guys want me to love every weapon out there, but you know, some weapons are better than others. That's just an inevitable part of a first-person shooter. But if you missed any of my other videos, I did a Battlefield 3 Aftermath live session outtakes yesterday. And before that, I did some tips on the scavenger game mode, which is new to the Aftermath DLC. So if you're struggling with that, check either of those out. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.